Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Weiss, and this is the Ask Jason Weiss show. Although I am an attorney by trade and an attorney by practice, nothing today is legal advice. Nothing today shall be creating an attorney-client privilege. None of that will apply. This is just informational only. And the same will go with financial advice, investing advice, and all of that, because today I have with me a very close friend and my own personal financial advisor, Mr. Tunde Ogunlana. And Tunde and I met probably about 20 years ago when
it's longer, man. Yeah.
I wasn't gray and he was still tall and bald, but that was.
No, I wasn't bald. We both have gotten old in our different ways.
Yeah,
I had short hair, but I still had hair. I can't.
Yeah, you shave it. You shave it. So Tunde is the founder of Axial Family Wealth Advisors, and he will tell us a little bit about that, and he will tell us a little bit about some of the trends in the market that he sees without giving financial advice, certain things that he sees, and certain life difficulties, professional difficulties, and all that kind of good stuff. So Tunde can be found on LinkedIn. He can be found everywhere, anywhere. And without further ado, Mr. Tunde Ogunlana.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on your show. And I'm trying to do the math, Jason, because I think it's been about 22 or 23 years. It's been a long time.
It's probably somewhere around 2001, 2000.
I think that's what I'm thinking, right? And it's 2024 now. So
yeah, 20 to 22 years.
I can say this. Obviously, both of us, because of our age, we've known people longer than we've known each other. But I would say you're probably one of the few friends of mine that I still stay in touch with on a decently consistent basis over that time. So I appreciate it. It's nice to kind of come full circle here. Now, like you said, we're gray and we're bald. Or at least I'm bald.
Yeah. Well, I'll take all the gray without bald. So let's get into a couple of things. Everybody right now is terrified about the market, about the economy. They start throwing out that R word. And you're in the financial investment, arena. So first of all, tell us exactly what a wealth advisor is. Let's start there. You are a wealth advisor. What the heck does that mean to somebody who's out there that has no clue?
That's a great question because I rarely get asked that question. And it's funny. I'm smiling because the first thing I want to say is it's kind of BS like many other titles that we carry. And in that sense, and I don't mean that as it's total BS. I just mean that to me, the definitions of wealth advisor, financial planner, in some cases, financial consultant, depending on what type of consulting, we're all interchangeable. That's a better definition than BS. And so what it really means.
I hang on. I think I lost you for a sec there. So while he's fixing it and keeping us can't hear you, sir. So while he's fixing that,
you should hear me now?
Now we hear you.
Right.
Okay, so you got us to the point. You're like, it's known and it's all this and it's BS, but I'm going to tell you the secret sauce recipe to the.
Yeah, and then of course everything freaks out. And you know what it is? It's because I'm a dinosaur with tech, and somehow these headphones are Bluetooth to the computer with my cell phone and all that. So someone tried to call me twice in a row, and I turned off myself. So fully off. So hopefully this won't happen again. So I apologize, but
that's one of the things they never taught you in law school.
Yeah, exactly.
Plug my book. Shit they never taught you in law school. Go find it. All right. So back to
don't forget, and for your audience, we'll be on our show in March discussing your book. So that's a whole plug for all bunch of stuff. But Yeah, so let me answer the question and not keep everyone in this magical suspense here that happened unintentionally. So my point is, where I was going was, I joked to a client on a meeting recently that I just going to give up all these titles and consider myself a financial therapist. And the reason I say that, and I'm joking, of course, I'll keep my official title of
You
wealth
can't be
manager,
a
but
therapist without being like licensed. You're going to have all different types of.
yeah, well, exactly. I forgot I'm being interviewed by a great attorney.
And here's the funniest thing. I used to have on my LinkedIn page that I was a consigliere, which, that's just somebody that's a go-between and someone that's a rep.
Yeah.
And I had a woman email me and tell me that she wants to know if I'm tied in with the mob and Italian mob.
Yeah.
That's what a consigliere is. So you got to be very careful
I know.
with what your titles are. So as
you should have wrote her back like, on behalf of all Italian Americans, I'm very offended that you would go right there.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID when not everybody was as sensitive. Okay, so
sensitive,
you're a family wealth advisor.
So, yeah, and so the reason I joke about the term therapist, because clearly I'm not a licensed medical therapist, but I joke about it because what I've learned over the years is money, like many things in life, I would say in this case, maybe like food, I've learned is extremely psychological in terms of our relationship with our money, what drives us with our money. And the reason I use food is an easy one for me just to think of, because I think of things like comfort food. People, unfortunately, I've learned over, as I've aged, that unfortunately some people that were abused as young children, ate their way to comfort, and that had negative effects, later in life. And when they're our age, they're middle age, and you're sitting there seeing them obese or something like that, if you really get into it, it's not that they have a moral failing, they're not lazy, is that they had some kind of trauma early on, and the way that their young brain learned to cope with it was eating, and probably unhealthy. And so what I've learned, even looking at my own reflection as I learn about myself as I aged, and I would ask myself, well, why am I making these certain decisions financially? Why? And a lot of it came back to my childhood and how I was raised. And I was raised by a single mom. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 2, and he went back to Nigeria, which is where I get my name. And so I was raised by a mom who was struggling financially and kind of in the check to check type of world. And so I think that, I think that's one thing that got me interested when I was getting into the college kind of stage of life and all that, about learning about finance and about money, was because I knew kind of instinctually as a young person that when I grew up, I didn't want to have the same patterns that my mom had and have the same lifestyle. And my mom was awesome and I love her, but it's just, pointing out she's a human being too. And then the second thing, like I say, as I aged and matured in the business and dealing with so many clients, right? I could have 10 people lined up with the same balance sheet, but each of them are going to have a different life story, different emotional state about their money, what they care about, their life goals and all that. So that's when I kind of started realizing, like, yeah, the balance sheet, the kind of financial part, I'm not going to say it's the easy part, but it's the part that's more scientific and mechanical. It is what it is. And yeah, of course, we can get into the stock market and all that. But when I'm just looking at someone's finances, their budget, it's like math. But I realized the whole right brain part of life, the creative, the emotional, a lot of times in our industry, that's just not talked about as much. I mean, lately in the last decade, I think our industry has done a much better job with things like behavioral finance and all that. But traditionally, people still approach it mechanically, like left brain. They just come to me, hey, here's some money today. Can you be a casino and turn $1 million into 10 million before I retire, which will be in 8 years? And it's like, okay, it doesn't work like that. So that's what I mean by being a therapist is, the markets, the money, the budgeting, the balance sheet is one thing. But if I've learned and I've evolved that if I really don't know the other part of someone's life, their emotional state, their family dynamics, all that, then I can't really give them the advice. Let me say it, that I would like to give. Maybe other people can give great advice without all that knowledge. But the way I'm wired, I want to know all that stuff about a family as well, not just the money. So that's what I mean by therapist, because you start getting into all kind of emotional conversations and things like that. So hopefully that's a definition that is palatable.
Right. And it's funny because, I when I started this journey of, getting away from the law more and getting more into coaching to start, it was, I'm not a coach, right? I look at a coach as someone who's rah, 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 or the coach says, okay, this is the play I drew up, let's run it, right? That's not what I am. So I'm more of a consultant, is the way I look at it. Because if you say to me, hey, Jay, and you're a lawyer, let's say, hey, Jay, I have, this case and I'm not 100% sure where to go, or with my legal career, I don't know which path to take. I'm not going to say, oh, you should go into family law because, you love your family, right? But I may say to the person, well, what is it about the law that you love? What it is about the law that you hate? What it is about where you're at, that you're happy with, that you're not happy with? And when they come to the conclusion themselves, they'll be like, holy cow, like the best thing in life is to adopt a child. I want to do adoption law.
Yeah.
Go for it. That's where it is. So I think it's the same thing with you. You're an advisor based on what they've told you, right? So for example, I know you help out family members and friends of mine. And one of the things that I know you keep in mind is that, my older family members, they're more conservative. They just want to make sure that they've got enough money so that they can, live the rest of their lives the way they're doing it. And then I have other friends that are like, nah, I want to be rich. Help me get rich. And let's get aggressive and let's do that. So I think you have to ask those tough questions. So here's a tough question for you. When we first met 20 plus years ago, you would work with anyone, right? Anyone, if they could invest $10 a month to,
if they fogged up a mirror, they were a potential target of mine.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, what is, like, we all should be planning for the future financially, right? I don't care if you're married, single, kids, no kids, live at home, do your parents live with you, whatever it is. But like, when should a responsible individual begin to think about, man, I got to put money away for the future? Or like, my son's 17. Is that too early? My daughter's 14. Is that too early? I was in my 20s. Was that too late? Because I do know, speaking with other people in the industry, that they're telling me now that they would always tell you, start investing at 30. And then they changed it to start investing at 40. And now I've heard, and I don't believe this, but 40 is the new 50. No, 50 is the new 40. So if you start investing at 50, you're okay.
Yeah.
So what in a perfect, there's no such thing as a perfect world, but if you were teaching a high school level class, let's just say to juniors in high school that are 17 years old, and they raise their hand, Mr. Ogunlana, when should I start investing and what do you recommend? Not financial advice, but please go ahead and answer the question, sir.
No, it's I'm laughing because it reminds me of when I was 44, which is already in the rearview mirror. I saw a new GP, and then she starts telling me about, but you got to worry about colon cancer and all this. I'm like, okay, well, let's do the Cologuard thing you're telling me about. And then when she looked at my birthday, she's like, oh, well, your insurance won't pay for it because you're not 45. And I was like, well, I can still have cancer. So it's funny.
Is that where you poop in a box and mail it away?
Yeah, exactly. That one. Yeah. So, hey, that's better than them putting something up there to look around. So that's why I told her I'd take that one.
Can you imagine if you don't seal it right and you're...
Yeah, no, I don't even... let's not go there. Let's stick on the money stuff. But the reason I bring it up in a joking way is to say, yes, our society is built with these parameters that we're all just supposed to magically fall into. And, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And
correct.
Who knows? Maybe someone that's 36 could have colon cancer. We should be screening people starting at 30. But that's just our system. So with the investments, I think I'll agree with, where your sentiment was on the latter part of your statement, which is, I wouldn't wait till 50 to start investing. Because, the time value of money and compounding, all that is real. And the earlier you start, basically the less you'll have to put away in terms of big chunks as you get closer to certain goals. Because I think when most people ask me this question, like, okay, it's a great point. You've got a 17-year-old as your oldest. Should he start now? I mean, there's nothing wrong with starting now, but if you're asking me, should he start now in terms of trying to alleviate anxiety about his retirement at the traditional age of 65 or whatever Social Security says his regular retirement age is, I would say no. You don't need to. And this is where I'm saying about the therapy part with a smile. It's because what I've noticed in my 22-year career is this is the biggest enemy of all of us as relates to our lives today, from the politics to everything else. And I'm noticing that the financial media has taken cues from the political media, which is if we disturb people enough, they'll click on our stuff, they'll click on our ads and our thumbnails, and they'll watch our YouTube videos, and we'll get engagement and we'll make money. And so that's why in my news feed, I have to be very careful and curated and pull stuff out that the algorithms are trying to feed me and make sure I don't click on, because every third headline is the S&P is going to drop by 60%. And to your point about that level of anxiety with the economy, think about what I'm about to say versus what we know our fellow Americans in general feel about the economy. The Dow Jones just hit 38,000, which is an all-time high last month, after hitting 37,000, which was the prior high the month before. The S&P hit a high. The economists 2 weeks ago thought we would have 176,000 jobs created in the prior month. We had 343,000. So we still have record low unemployment. And our GDP just came in a week ago at 5%, which is, I don't know if we've had a 5% GDP number since the great financial crisis in 2008. And if we did, it probably was just one blip. So my point is that from every metric of data, the economy seems to be doing fine. And I recognize that doesn't mean everybody in our system of 330 million people is feeling great. But I'm saying just from traditional metrics, we shouldn't be freaking out about the economy. But to your point, Jason, everyone's freaking out. So I would say part of it is taming the anxiety, and then the savings and investing is what's the goal. So if we want to save for your son's first home, I would say, yeah, probably starting at 17 and teaching kids how to put money away, because maybe he'll buy a home in 10 years, right? So that makes a lot of sense if you wanted to start coaching that kind of savings. But worrying about when your son, who's 17, when he's 67 in 50 years, I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned. Like, yeah, if he starts working, Jason, because he's at the age of working, right? And let's say they offer him a 401k at his job, even if he's part-time because he's still in high school. I would say, yeah, go participate. Or if you said, Tunde, my son just got a part-time job, so now he's got a W-2, should we do a Roth IRA? I would say, yeah, that's not a bad idea. I just wouldn't get anxious about if you didn't do that. So the idea of teaching kids and when do we invest and what ages, I think should be dealt with in several different folds. One is, what's your goal? Because the whole point of money is it's a tool that you can do something else with, right? And you can exchange it for some sort of value or service. So if I'm just saying I want to invest to invest, okay, that's like throwing a dart and not even knowing where the dartboard is. So that's why we start with goals. What do you want to do with this? What's the purpose of this? So on and so forth. And then, like I said, if it's a long-term goal like retirement, we can kind of treat it and look at it one way. And if it's a more shorter-term goal, like I just want to have $100,000 saved in the next 2 years, because then I can make certain choices, then that's okay. Then let's drive towards that. And each, let me say, not say each, but different goals may have a different way of looking at accumulating those savings and which investment vehicles. Because if you were to say, Tunde, I need the money in 2 years, I'd say, yeah, maybe buying really aggressive stocks, that might be kind of risky in a short period. If you said, yeah, Tunde, my 17-year-old, when he's 67, I just want to open a Roth IRA, I might say, let's go to town with aggressive stocks because he has time to deal with the ups and downs.
Right.
Or I might say someone who's short-term with rates the way they are, let's just invest in CDs and maybe short-term bonds because you can make 5-6% in a 2-year period without all this up and down. So that's why, to me, the psychology part is important, because for me to just blanketly tell people, hey, just invest when you start at 30. I mean, that to me, that's kind of like the doctor, I'd be committing malpractice if I just threw pills at somebody without really diagnosing them, in a sense.
Right. You're 30 years old, start taking calcium, potassium, and vitamin B without doing the blood test and figuring it out. And again,
exactly.
Checking the financial pulse is real. Look, my 17-year-old, he does some lacrosse lessons here and there, and he's getting paid, and they're taking out taxes, but he's not going to be able to invest. I mean, what we've done is, grandma gives you $50 for your birthday, let's put 25 in the bank and you can spend 25, and grandma gives you this, let's do that. So we've done that. I was thankfully financially capable of doing the Florida prepaid college for him, so he's paid off. Chances are he's not going to Florida school, but that's another story for another day. But to do to just have that knowledge, to know what's going on.
So, let me do a quick follow on that, Jason, because as you're saying, just because I know your family, right, and your family dynamics, I'm without obviously getting into your family business, well, because I'm thinking of someone, because this is a great conversation about like how I might advise a family, because you've got a son who's going to hopefully play NCAA lacrosse, right?
Correct.
And now it's about also knowing what's going on in the greater society and all that. What do we know? And you're very well versed in the sports, I know. We have the kind of new thing in recent years with this NIL stuff, right?
Yep.
So that could be a conversation with a family like you that I might have, which is, okay, what can we do from an NIL perspective? And this would be more you telling me, like, okay, I'm not saying we should have a meeting now in front of all your people.
And I just want to put this out there for the listeners.
Yeah.
We're both in Florida. NIL deals for high school students in the state of Florida is still not legal. You could do them in college, and the University of Florida, go Gators, got into a little bit of hot water for that. But so for a high school student in Florida, there's no such thing as an NIL deal. Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a great point.
Now take Logan out of high school and put him into college, or use a different state. Now continue.
Yeah, no, this is great. And my point is that's another example, because I didn't know that about high school specifically. So it's another great example of knowing kind of what's going on around you, which I clearly did in that detail. But it's more of, because
it's amazing, and I don't want to get into politics at all. But our state during COVID, you could go wherever you want. You didn't need masks. You could do whatever you want. But get an NIL deal? No way. So
no, it's interesting, because I was thinking more of college. I didn't even know that there was a potential for high school. But so my thought would be, just finishing up the example, is let's look at how can we use that with your son and lacrosse, and I'd say let's look at the type of marketing in lacrosse, different social media sites, all that, and how can we maybe leverage his fact he's young, and maybe his personality, if he wants to start doing ads for certain businesses and all that. Is there a local car dealership? Let's say he went to University of Missouri somewhere. Is there a local car dealership near the university that might want to have a popular kid on campus being their spokesperson, and they're paying him $1,000 a month? Those are the kind of things that we would say, okay, let's learn about that. And then, to your point, what are the goals of your son and your family, right? Because your son's still young, obviously. And so then we would want to design just an investment allocation and review timeline and all that towards that. And as he grows, right? Because going back to maybe a better example is when he said you started in your 20s, because I did the same thing. I wasn't making money in college. So we all kind of go corporate, early 20s. And I did several things. I bought a cash value life insurance policy. I had a Roth IRA. I had just obviously a bank account. So I had my 401k at work, at the big corporation that hired me. So the type of thing is like, I had a few different lanes, and each one was little. I think one of them, I think the life insurance was $50 a month. The Roth was $100 a month, whatever little percentage of the 401k they took out of my check. And the idea, because I'm being trained in this as well, I kind of was anticipating that, okay, as I make a little more money, I'll bump it up. And I remember, at some point I got up to like $400 a month into my Roth by the time I was maybe 26, and I was adding more to my 401k. And so that's what gave me the ability that by the time I was 30, I was just in a healthier financial place than I might have otherwise been.
Now for the unsophisticated listeners, you like myself, because I don't know the answer to one of these. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned whole life. You mentioned, I don't think you mentioned it, but term life and a Roth IRA. I know what whole life is. I know what term life is. I'm not 100% sure what the Roth IRA is. So for the listeners that are more sophisticated than me, just quick whole life, term life, and Roth IRA.
Okay, so you have an idea of what a Roth IRA is because I can vouch for the fact you do own an IRA.
But I know what an IRA is.
You have what is called a traditional IRA, and an IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. So they were created in '74, I believe, as part of the ERISA Act, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, as it's known. That created 401ks and all these different type of plans we hear of today, and so the whole point really was that the government started seeing the stats that life expectancy was starting to creep up because Americans were being better fed and we had better healthcare and all that. Because remember, when Social Security started in the 1930s during the Great Depression, the average life expectancy was around 65. So that's why they could say, okay, you get paid at 65, and statistically, most Americans wouldn't live that long, so it wasn't that much of a spend on the U.S. Treasury, on the Social Security Administration. Fast forward, 40 years and better lifestyles for us, life expectancies crept up. So the government tried to incentivize us Americans to start saving our own money and using the tax code as a way to manipulate our behavior. And I don't mean the word manipulate in a negative way. It's just the way to define it. And so what that meant was that you, Jason Weiss, coming out of law school, and you get hired by XYZ law firm, they have a 401k plan that they offer to you, right? And I'll use very simple math, that someone might make $100,000 even in salary. The IRS might say, well, we'll allow you to put a maximum of $20,000 this calendar year into the plan. And for doing that, we'll allow you to deduct that from your overall income. So from a tax perspective, the person making 100 is seen that year in the eyes of the IRS as only making 80 because the 20 was deferred into the 401k. And so if, let's just say hypothetically, they're in the 25% tax bracket, then 20,000 not being taxed is a $5,000 approximate savings from going to the IRS. Let's just say with no inflation bump and all that, if we did that for 10 years straight, that means I was able to, or that person was able to put away $200,000, 10 times 10 years, sorry, 20,000 times 10 years. But then if they avoided the same $5,000 tax every year, that means that's $50,000 that didn't go to the IRS, that was allowed to invest for them. So, and then the other thing is that as the money is growing inside of the retirement plan, it is not being taxed. So you're not getting a 1099 for dividend income, interest income, or any capital gains. So that's the IRA. Then what happens is, like when my friend over here left the law firm to go into his own private practice, he called me and he said, Tunde, I left the law firm and I don't want my 401k over there with these people. What do we do? And so that's what happened. That's the idea, is an individual retirement account was created so that people who either didn't have an employer and were making money, like a sole proprietor, or someone like when you left the big firm environment to do your own thing, someone that leaves an employer but says, hey, I don't want my money stuck at the old plan and have to call an 800 number and be limited to, let's say, the 20 mutual funds in that plan. I'd like to be able to control it myself or bring it to another professional or something like that. And so what happens is the IRS allows for what they call a like-to-like transfer. So they'll allow you to transfer the money from your 401k or your employer plan to this individual retirement account without being taxed. So that's kind of that whole ecosystem. Now, to specifically answer the Roth question, I think it was 1997, and I think it was a congressman or senator whose name was Roth who proposed this act, and it was passed clearly. The idea was to give people a choice, because prior to this Roth legislation, the only option to put money in a retirement plan was to do it the way I had explained it. You make a contribution, the value of that contribution is deducted from your current income, which is great today. But then what happens is, if you do a great job over X amount, 30, 40 years of saving like that, and I've got some clients that have this problem now. Now you've got a big fat IRA with, 7 figures, maybe some people even 8 figures, and every single penny you pull out of there is taxable. So the traditional type of IRAs and 401ks are very good when you're working and you're making the deposit now because you're escaping some income tax. But when you're older, you're 70 and you've got this huge balloon, and maybe even I've seen this where some people might have 100,000 to their name outside of their plan, like in the bank or something, and they've got $4 million sitting in an IRA. And every time they want to take out money, I remember one client of ours who's since passed away. This is years ago when houses were less expensive. He was lamenting the fact, he's like, Tunde, I wanted to help my son and just give him $100,000 for the down payment on his new home, but I had to take out $150,000 because the IRS has to get their hands in it. And then he laughed. He goes, I shouldn't have listened to all the guys like you when I was in my 40s in the 1980s that kept telling me to put all this money in these plans. And I was like, yeah, well, now it's too late. Yeah. So the Roth was an alternative to that, which is basically, I'm going to put my money in today. I don't get a tax deduction, but the money is allowed to grow tax-free. And if I do have this huge balloon at the end of the day when I'm 70 and there's a $4 million in there, I can pull every penny out tax-free. So the Roth is a great tool for when you want the money. And also, I know we didn't discuss this, but this is in my head. It's better as an estate planning tool, because if we die
your Roth is post-tax dollars
correct
being invested, so you don't pay tax when you pull it out.
Correct. So in going back to that fast example of the young person making $100,000 out of college at the law firm, so if we put the $20,000, let's say, into a Roth 401k, because there are a lot of employers that are beginning to offer those. So the IRS would still tax you on the $100,000, even though you put it in the Roth. They wouldn't consider, the 80,000 as your income. They'd say you were taxing you at 100. But yeah, if you did a great job for the next 4 years and you had millions of dollars in the Roth, and whenever you want to pull money out, there's zero taxes. So it's kind of a pick your poison type of thing.
So let's talk about the other portion of my question, which was a term life and whole life. I kind of know what those are. I mean, and there's keywords that everybody should hone in on. Term, whole. Okay.
Yeah.
With that great introduction, go for it.
So this is great because I get to use all of the old life insurance guys who I used to go on these trainings when I was like 22, and there were these old guys from Brooklyn, back from that generation of that middle 20th century. But these guys were like 70s. They would be, if someone doesn't want to buy insurance, just tell them no one ever died on time. All these little jokes, like, yeah. So I remember one of the analogies, which is probably, a lot of people have probably heard this because it's a good one, is basically think of term insurance like renting an apartment, and the whole life is like buying your home. And so the term, to your point, you're buying insurance, so you're kind of renting it in a sense for a specified term of time. And so think of the word term as a length of a period of time. And there's a lot of different nuances to it, but I'll just keep it simple and say, generally, we hear of 10, 20, and 30-year term insurance. So and that's just basically you're renting the insurance. So, I have term, I know you have term, a lot of people have it because it's cheap. And then, and kind of like renting an apartment, it's cheaper than buying your own home and then making that kind of investment. And I'll explain why in a second. But just to stick on the length of time part, so traditionally it's supposed to work like this. I buy a 20-year term. I die anytime within the 20 years of the policy anniversary, it fully pays out. If I die one day after the policy is expired, technically it doesn't pay out. Now, there's all kind of bells and whistles the industry's come up with. There's term conversion rules, all that. So that's why I said those are nuances that, somebody's got to sit down and have a full meeting to get through. But
And someone told me recently that a term life insurance really isn't for you to take care of your family after you pass. It's to take care of your family while you're in your earning years and you are supporting them. So for me to have a term life insurance policy that, ends in 10 years from now when my son he's 17 now, my daughter is 14 now, to get it through so that, he's 27, she's 24, That's great, right? But it's not really in there for when I die, let's say at 70, for my spouse to get all the money and all of that. So that,
Correct. Especially at the age you were when you bought it all, because
right.
it'll all be expired by the time, you get to that point in life.
I think I took in my 20s, I took a 30-year
30
term.
year, yeah.
And then when I was a little bit older in my 30s.
And we've known each other too long, because now I'm starting to think you probably got to repeat that, because we're within 10 years of the thing, expiring. But no, you're absolutely right, Jason. And to piggyback on that, all term, except for one company that I know of, generally expires at age 85. So meaning, like, if you were 65, they just wouldn't offer you a 30-year term, right? They would say the maximum you get is 20. And if you were 69 and you said, I want to buy a 20-year term, the company would say, all right, that's fine, but at 85 it still stops. So that's most companies. I mean, like I said, there's some nuances with that in certain companies that might go over. And you're right. So let's switch to the whole life. And when I say whole life, I'll say I'm representing all permanent insurance for those people that know a little bit more about it. Because there's universal, there's index universal, variable, all that stuff. But the idea generally is, the reason why we call it permanent insurance versus term is, to your point, Jason, most contracts now that I've seen from, let's say, a dozen different of the largest carriers usually go to age 121. Just because I guess the actuarial science, they do need to say we stop this at some point. Clearly, I think only one human being I've ever heard of lived longer than that. Some old French lady, I think, has a record of being 122. But we can assume that most of us won't be here past 120 or even past 100. The idea, if you were to live that long, they'll basically just give you the death benefit. Right. So I guess it would be a good celebration if you did that live that long. But the idea would be, yes, Jason, you could take, let's say, if you wanted to plan from now, you have the whole life that you have and you're funding it. And maybe that's a smaller death benefit amount because, number one, depending on how the policy is designed, you can grow the death benefit on a permanent policy over time. Number two is, to your point, maybe you have, let's not talk into what you have. Maybe what a person has, maybe they start now and just say, I want $250,000 just in whole life because I just want to make sure that people can bury me. And if there's a little bit of mortgage or something left, and, deal with inflation. But you're young enough, Jason, that if you paid for that thing and you died and then life expectancy, let's say your early 80s, the death benefit might have crept up to $600,000 by then, just because of some formulas they might have with how the cash value can buy more coverage. So that could be an inflation hedge for you and the family down the road. But in the meantime, to your point, you might have, or a person in your shoes with the family that you have, meaning a 17 and 14-year-old, might have $2 or $3 million in term insurance. Because to your point, if, God forbid, you got hit by a bus on the way home from work, or you did develop some kind of cancer at this age, then we know that with a young family, your wife still needs, she still has decades that she could live. So she may want to put $1 million or $2 million somewhere and say, look, I need to live off that. Again, your kids may have the college costs upcoming and all that. You're not here to earn the income to pay for it. So yeah, we might have a huge amount of term insurance to take care of the needs if you leave us prematurely. But then we need less insurance, to your point, for when you're older. And then the only caveat I'll say on this kind of conversation is I have seen, because of the nuances of things like estate taxes and things like that, where maybe an older person does find value in, like, someone in their 60s to say, hey, let me just get a $5 million policy, put it in some sort of irrevocable trust so it's outside of my estate, and that will pay the taxes so that my family's not forced to, let's say, have a fire sale on real estate or stocks in the event, let's say, I die in an economic year like 2008, where everything is just terrible and my family's forced to just do these fire sales. So there's some nuances as to why an older person may want to buy a big fat life insurance policy, but I would say that's probably 5% of the population. For most of us, you're right. We probably don't need that much life insurance once we're older.
Yep. So, all right. So we're creeping up on 40 minutes, and unfortunately, we're going to wrap this up. Two things I want to say real quick is, if I get hit by a bus on my way home from work today, I got bigger problems because I'm working from home. And the other thing is that my wife's family seems to live a very, very long time. So I need to be prepared as on her and hopefully my kids. Again, You are not giving financial advice. You are not giving anything
Thank you, sir.
like that, and I am not giving legal advice. But I usually end the show with a really, really tough question. And for you, I'm going to give a little bit of a tweak on that. If somebody were to come to you and say, "Hey, Tunde, I got X amount of dollars that I want to invest in something fun," and the reason I'm doing this question is I see art behind you, right?
Yeah.
What would you say? You know, like, and an example I'm using is art, baseball cards, sneakers. If you had, I don't know, $10,000 of just play money that you wanted to take a risk, straight up risk, and this is only you, only Tunde, so it's not legal or investment advice, where would you dabble?
All right. So me personally,
Yep.
That's a good question. You did stump me. You know what I think I would do is I would invest in myself and my future in my business and ability to generate wealth through maybe traveling to some place for some kind of training or something. Because I enjoy traveling and let's say there was a financial conference.
No, that's a cop out, but I'll give it to you.
No, I'm thinking if there's an investment conference in Italy, let's say, I would say, yeah, I'll blow 10 grand to go to Italy and learn maybe something, how I can grow my business, but this is also fun for me, right? Because to your point, I just don't think, I mean, I love art. Clearly, this is behind me, and I get it with the baseball card. To me, that's just not fun. That's all. That's like, all right, whatever. That's like buying stocks. It's not that it's not of interest. It's just not fun.
I know my grandmother, if she ever had money floating around, there were two things that she would buy: gold and diamonds. Those were her things. And so that's what it was. And I know we've talked about different precious metals and all of that. So, but no,
the problem is, Jason, that my hobby
in yourself and going to Italy was not the answer I was expecting, but it's spot on. So
no, because Jason, unfortunately, the hobby I did fell in love with is something no one should ever invest their money in. They should be like you and have a friend with one, which is boating. So if I just tell you, Jason, I want to buy a bigger boat, then I know there's no return on that.
No. I know about 5 years ago, I would have invested in sneakers, all the Nikes and all of that. And I have all my baseball cards and all my football cards. And I'm looking at other things. So, you know, it's all good. But Tunde, I want to thank you. Of
course, man. This is great.
Not only for being on this show today, but for taking care of people that I know and love. Sometimes accepting clients that may not fit your normal criteria and your mold, and just wanting to be a good person and just being there to answer questions. So the best way to get in touch with Tunde would be find him on LinkedIn. Or go ahead and Tunde, for the people that can't see the screen, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I would say email is usually best, which is just my email address is simple. My first name, Tunde, Tunde, and then the @ and the name of the firm is Axial Family Advisors. That's AXIAL, the word family and the word advisors, ending in ORS.com, axialfamilyadvisors.com.
So, and real quick, I'm going to be on your show in March, and I will plug that in my next show, because I don't have a show on February 22nd because I got to go to court and take depots. That's another story for another day.
You're still working.
Yes, sir. Got to. Tunde, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. This is awesome. Yep. Take care.
And to all the listeners, thank you so much for listening.